Joining me here on set is constitutional lawyer Bruce Fein. So a lot to get through here, Bruce. Want to get your take on what I asked Hendrik. U.S. has this deadline to file for a formal, or to put forth a formal extradition request. What is the process there? Is there a chance that they don't do it and she just walks away?
Well, that's obviously possible, especially given Mr. Trump's statement that implied he was not alerted to this particular aggression, if you will, before it happened, and that he would be inclined to intercede if it was necessary to avoid politically escalating the opposition or the atmosphere between the United States and China as it negotiates very seriously on trade relationships, including a report that's expected as early as tomorrow, complaining about Chinese alleged theft of intellectual property, hacking, and otherwise. Now, if extradition goes forward, there is in all treaties of this sort what's called the political crimes exception. If the Canadians conclude that the motivation behind this particular arrest and then followed with an extradition request was not really law enforcement, but to send a political signal to China, hey, she's kind of a pawn in bargaining so we get a better trade relationship, that is not an extraditable offense. That's exempt from extradition. And all the earmarks suggest that this is a political offense. Number one, what's the violation? Breaking sanctions with Iran? It's of trivial concern to the United States national security. It's not like that she's alleged to have stolen any intellectual property relating to nuclear technology or weapons systems or anything like that. And these kinds of violations of sanctions are routinely handled with a civil fine. Hundreds of millions of dollars occasionally. U.S. banks have been involved greatly with money laundering to North Korea and to Iran. And Jamie Dimon, the head of huge banks, are not criminally prosecuted. So all of those irregularities suggest there is a political motivation behind this. And I fully expect that within the 60-day period, for whatever reason, the United States will not go forward. I believe as we speak right now, American businessmen, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is over at the White House saying, are you guys crazy? You know, we need to travel to China too in order to advance our business interests, and you are setting a precedent that places us at risk. And remember also, Mr. Trump is a businessman. He understands that. He's traveling there. He, I think, would appreciate how absurd it is to take someone who's running a company and charge them criminally.
So he said, on the intervention, I'll do whatever's good for this country. I will do whatever's good for this country, I would do. So could he intervene?
Yes.
Legally, can he intervene and say, hey, we're not going to move forward on this extradition?
Yes. Once he said that, it would take 3 seconds for this to stop. My suspicion is that John Bolton, the national security advisor, who's notorious for saying, I always negotiate with all sticks and no carrots, is the one, because he obviously is trying to, in my judgment, cause further estrangement between the United States and China, South China Sea, North Korea, nukes, stealing intellectual property. This is just another quiver in his arsenal that he's trying to undertake without alerting the president to advance his own agenda. And I think the president wants to repudiate it. It would happen overnight.
So how do you see this playing out? I mean, how complicated could this case get when you have federal prosecution with diplomatic consequences?
Well, my suspicion is they may end up dropping any criminal charges, and there may be a fine of how many dollars or whatever. So there's some face saving in the sense that, okay, it wasn't really totally outlandish. There was some concession in civil, not criminal proceedings to suggest we did a fine. We were negligent in policing whether there was an evasion of the sanctions against Iran, something like that, where both parties are somewhat satisfied and you go away and she's free, and then they move on to the more serious questions of the long-term U.S.-China relationships with regard to trade, intellectual property, South China Sea, North Korea, a whole host of issues far more important than selling some piece of equipment to Iran, which is of no consequence at all to international stability.
Bruce Fein, always great to hear your take. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.